What if the reason you hate waking up early has nothing to do with mornings? Every night, Ethan made the promise. Tomorrow would be different. He would wake before everyone else, start the day with purpose, and become disciplined. He set alarms, placed his phone away, and went to bed believing that tomorrow morning would be the beginning of a life. Then morning arrived. The alarm rang. Ethan opened one eye, reached for the phone, and told himself he needed 5 more minutes. 5 minutes became 20. 20 became an hour, and by the time he got up, the day had already started without him. He rushed through breakfast, answered messages, postponed his plans, and promised himself he would try again tomorrow. Meanwhile, people seemed to move forward. They had time to exercise, study, think, and work on goals that Ethan kept postponing. So he concluded that he hated mornings. But what if that wasn't the problem? What if Ethan didn't hate waking up early at all? What if he simply hadn't discovered what was worth waking up for? Ethan was not lazy. In fact, that was what made his situation so frustrating. He had ambitions. He wanted to improve his English, become financially independent, exercise regularly, and build a future that felt different from the life he was living now. He could imagine the person he wanted to become quite clearly. The problem was getting there. Every night, Ethan created a better version of tomorrow. Tomorrow he would wake early. Tomorrow he would study. Tomorrow he would exercise. Tomorrow he would finally become disciplined. But when morning came, that imaginary version of Ethan seemed to disappear. Weeks became months. People around him seemed to be moving forward while he remained in the same place, collecting plans but struggling to turn them into habits. Eventually, Ethan stopped blaming his routine and started blaming himself. Maybe I just don't have enough discipline. That thought became heavier every time he failed. One evening, after another morning had disappeared into sleep and scrolling, Ethan was talking with someone who had noticed his frustration. The person listened quietly before saying, "Maybe your problem isn't that you hate waking up early. Maybe you don't know what you're supposed to do with the morning once you're awake." Ethan dismissed the idea. It sounded too simple. But later that night, the sentence returned to him. For the first time, he wondered whether he had been fighting the alarm instead of understanding what the alarm was supposed to give him. And that question stayed with him long after the room became quiet. There was one man Ethan kept noticing whenever he passed the small park near his home. His name was Daniel, and unlike everyone else rushing through the morning, Daniel seemed completely unhurried. He arrived early, but he never looked tired. He would sit quietly with a book, walk for a few minutes, write something in a notebook, and then spend time working on one important task. There was no frantic checking of messages, no constant switching between activities, and no sense that he was trying to outrun the day. Ethan found it strange. One morning, curiosity finally overcame him. "How do you make yourself wake up so early?" Ethan asked. Daniel looked at him and smiled. "I don't." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" "I don't make myself wake up early," Daniel said. "I created a morning I actually want to wake up for." The answer caught Ethan completely off guard. He had always thought discipline meant forcing yourself to do something you didn't want to do. Set the alarm, fight the tiredness, get out of bed, repeat. Daniel seemed to be describing something completely different. He explained that the morning gave him something most people rarely protected: uninterrupted attention. Before messages arrived, before other people's demands appeared, before the world became noisy, he had a small amount of time that belonged entirely to him. Then Daniel gave Ethan a challenge. "Tomorrow, don't wake up early to become disciplined. Wake up because there is something waiting for you." Ethan agreed. But as he walked home, he wasn't convinced. Still, for the first time, he wasn't thinking about how much he hated mornings. He was wondering what might happen if he finally gave one a reason to matter. The first morning was a failure. Ethan woke when the alarm rang, opened his eyes and stared into the darkness outside. His body felt heavy. The room was cold, his bed was comfortable, and nothing about getting up seemed worth the effort. He turned off the alarm. The second morning went slightly better. He managed to get out of bed, but within minutes he was tired, distracted, and wondering why he was putting himself through this. When he told Daniel, he expected another motivational speech. Instead, Daniel asked, "What time did you go to sleep?" Ethan hesitated. He had stayed up late scrolling through his phone, telling himself he would stop after one more video. One video became 20. By the time he put the phone down, he was already exhausted. Daniel nodded. "Then your problem didn't begin this morning." That made Ethan think. Waking early wasn't an isolated morning habit. It began the night before. Ethan was staying up too late, keeping his phone beside him, waking without a clear reason, depending on motivation, and expecting himself to become a completely different person overnight. Daniel explained it simply. You don't build a morning by setting an alarm. You build it by deciding what deserves your first attention. So Ethan changed the experiment. He would wake up, drink some water, leave his phone alone, spend 10 minutes outside, and then use his first focused block for one important goal. Nothing complicated. Nothing dramatic. And still, Ethan struggled. Some mornings he woke late. Some mornings he wanted to quit. Some mornings his mind immediately searched for an excuse. But something had changed. For the first time, Ethan wasn't waking up early simply because someone told him disciplined people should. He had something waiting for him. A quiet moment. A clear goal. And a small piece of the day that belonged to him. The first morning felt nothing like the inspiring picture Ethan had imagined. He got out of bed, drank water, stepped outside, and immediately wondered why he had agreed to this. The air was quiet, but his mind complained constantly. He almost turned around. By day 5, something subtle had changed. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt spacious. 10 uninterrupted minutes gave him room to think before everyone else's priorities arrived. On day 10, Ethan completed an English lesson before anyone else in his house was awake. The lesson itself was small, but the feeling was enormous. He had finished something meaningful before distraction had a chance to negotiate with him. By day 15, the rest of the day seemed lighter. He still worked hard, but he was no longer chasing the clock. One important task was already complete, and that quiet victory gave him confidence that lasted until evening. Then day 20 reminded him that progress was not perfection. He overslept, wasted the morning, and watched old habits return almost automatically. The familiar voice whispered, "You've ruined everything." Instead, he remembered Daniel's advice. Return. He put the phone down, opened his book, and completed one focused block. That decision mattered more than the failure because it proved he could recover without starting over. That recovery quietly changed his identity. The old Ethan believed he needed to feel motivated before he could begin. The new Ethan discovered that beginning was what created motivation. Every completed morning made the next one slightly easier. By day 30, waking early no longer felt like punishment. It felt like personal time he refused to give away. His English vocabulary had grown, his study sessions lasted longer, and his work became more organized. Friends noticed he complained less. His family noticed he smiled more. Yet the biggest change happened inside. Ethan finally trusted himself to keep a promise, even when it was small. He understood that discipline was not endless self-punishment. It was thoughtful design. By preparing the night before, protecting his first minutes, and returning after every setback, he had made the right choice easier than the wrong one. The morning had never been the enemy. It had simply reflected the habits he carried into it. Once those habits changed, the sunrise stopped feeling like an obstacle and became a quiet invitation to become the person he had imagined all along himself. A few weeks later, an opportunity appeared that would have terrified the old Ethan. He had an important English-speaking interview coming up. In the past, he would have waited until the deadline was close, then tried to prepare everything at once. He would stay up late, panic over what he didn't know, and promise himself he should have started earlier. This time was different. He had already spent mornings practicing. One day, he reviewed vocabulary. Another day, he listened to conversations. He practiced speaking when the house was quiet, wrote answers to common questions, and slowly became comfortable hearing his own voice in English. He wasn't perfect. There were still words he forgot. There were questions he couldn't answer immediately. But when the interview arrived, Ethan wasn't walking into the room hoping luck would rescue him. He was prepared. He answered more calmly than he expected. When he struggled with a question, he paused, thought, and continued instead of panicking. Afterward, he walked outside and realized something had changed. The old Ethan would have said, "Where did my time go?" Now he knew where his time had gone. It had gone into preparation. He returned to Daniel a few days later. "The mornings changed everything," Ethan said. Daniel smiled. "No, the mornings didn't change you. What you repeatedly did with them changed you." Ethan understood. The secret had never been waking before sunrise just to prove that he could. The real advantage was protecting the first part of his day from unnecessary demands and giving his best attention to something that mattered. The old Ethan said, "I'll do it later." The new Ethan could say, "I've already started." The old Ethan waited for motivation. The new Ethan had a routine. And that difference gave him something he had never possessed before, evidence that he could trust himself. The morning had not magically created a better life. It had simply given Ethan a quiet place to practice becoming better, one ordinary day at a time. Maybe Ethan's story sounds familiar, because the real problem was never the alarm. It was what he believed the morning was supposed to be. You do not need to wake up at 5 in the morning because someone online told you successful people do. You do not need to copy another person's routine, wake up at 4, take a cold shower, exercise for an hour, and pretend you suddenly became a different person. And you certainly do not need to become a morning person overnight. The deeper lesson is much simpler. Your first hours should not automatically belong to everyone else. Before messages, notifications, requests, and distractions begin competing for your attention, you have a chance to decide what matters to you. So ask yourself, what do I actually want to accomplish? What goal deserves my freshest attention? What would make me proud before the day becomes noisy? Maybe your answer is English. Don't tell yourself, "I need to improve my English." That's too vague. Choose one action. Read 1 page, learn 5 words, listen for 10 minutes, practice speaking for 5 minutes, write 5 sentences. Small enough to begin, clear enough to finish. The second principle is to prepare the night before. A successful morning often begins before you go to sleep. Put your phone somewhere away from your bed. Prepare your clothes. Decide what you will work on. Go to bed at a reasonable time. Remove unnecessary decisions before morning arrives. You are not trying to make discipline harder. You are making the right action easier. The third principle is to protect your first focused block. Maybe that block starts at 5. Maybe it starts at 6:30. Maybe your schedule means it begins at 8. The exact hour matters less than what you do with it. For those 25 minutes, your attention belongs to one meaningful task. No unnecessary notifications. No endless scrolling. No reacting to everyone else's priorities. Just one thing that moves your life forward. And if you want to test this idea instead of simply listening to it, try a 7-day challenge. For the next 7 days, go to sleep at a consistent time and wake at a realistic time. Keep your phone away for the first 25 minutes. Choose one important task and work on it for 25 focused minutes. Then write down what you actually completed. That's it. Do not measure the challenge by how early you wake up. Measure it by what you do with the time you protect. Because Ethan thought he hated waking up early. What he actually hated was waking up to a morning that felt empty, difficult, and pointless. Once he discovered something meaningful waiting for him, the battle changed. And maybe yours can change too. You don't need a perfect routine. You don't need endless motivation. You need a reason to begin, a small period of protected attention, and the willingness to return tomorrow. Because the world will always demand your attention. Your phone will wait. Other people's priorities will wait. The noise will wait. But your goals need a place in your day, and you have to protect that place deliberately. Don't wake up early just to watch the clock. Wake up with something worth giving your attention to. Your morning doesn't have to become perfect. It only has to become intentional. So tomorrow, when you wake up, don't ask how early you got up. Ask what you chose to give your first focused 25 minutes to. If you are willing to try it for 7 days, tell me in the comments. What will you do with your first focused 25 minutes? Maybe that one answer will be the beginning of a routine you finally trust.